Life is full of good stuff and bad stuff. It's full of light and dark. I'm someone who has gone through my fair share of trauma in my life. And while I don't wish it to anybody else to spill my guts on absolutely everything, I am the kind of person who believes in open communication, in discussion, that nothing should ever be off the table. And I'm not the kind of person, therefore, who gives out trigger warnings or anything of the sort. However, in this video, in the second to last chapter, in the final story, there is a mention of sexual abuse. It's not something that myself or Alex experienced firsthand, but instead a memory of Alex's that I may well be the last person alive to know about. I don't know if he ever shared this with anybody else. And to those who knew Alex, of which I know several people who watch these videos, this may come as a big shock. So it's a word of warning that this may be a video that's very hard to digest. And while I was certainly no perpetrator of anything traumatic in that sense, I don't come off particularly well in how I reacted at the time. With that being said, welcome to Chronicles of Alex Part 5. It does get a lot lighter before it gets quite dark, because this is the tale of me going to visit Alex at his grandparents in Northampton, and it's told chronologically. The revelation that I mentioned earlier will be on the trip back from Southampton into East Sussex, but before that we've got loads of great stories of just me going up to Northampton and having a pretty chill 4-day weekend with the guy. As it turns out, I actually talked about this trip to Northampton in my first Isles of Scilly video that I made talking about Alex way back in, I think, 2020 or 2019. But in this video, I'm going to go into it in a little bit more detail. So let's get into it. So at some point, Alex probably had one of his infamous arguments with his mum, because he ended up living in Northampton with his grandparents. Logically, it would have had to been her parents. I figured that he decided that he couldn't just couch surf. Maybe his mum decided that he needed to be somewhere that was going to look after him really well, but also, be like a fixed place. So he ended up living at his grandparents, and I'm guessing he must have got a little bit bored without me, because he calls me up and invites me to come up and visit him in Northampton. And I love driving, so I just get in my van and I just go straight up there, no messing. When I arrived there, Alex seems to have it pretty well together. He, I think, got his first job in an electrical store around this time. He always ended up working in electrical stores, I know, for a good while after that. And I think he did pretty well with them, to be honest. He had his own little bedroom that was always sort of tidy, and it just was kind of a quaint, cute little lifestyle that just suited him really well, and it just seemed to be doing wonders for him. Of course, when Alex invites me up, that's going to change a little bit, just as a given. So I arrived there, and Alex's grandparents are completely welcoming to me. Typical Midlands sort of hospitality. They make me a meal as soon as I arrive. They're incredibly friendly. I don't remember them too much, but I remember chatting to them quite a lot. And after a while, I ask Alex about, well, what is there to do around Northampton? And he says, not too much, but let's go for a walk and see what we can do. We go for a walk around Northampton, around the town centre there. And yeah, it's pretty much just your average town centre as far as two 20-year-olds are concerned. Then we come across a gala casino. Now I should let you know, my favourite X-Men when I was a kid was Gambit. I idolized the character of Setzer from Final Fantasy VI. In fact, that was my aim of who I wanted to be. I always pictured myself with these kind of romantic ideas of like one day going down to Monte Carlo and rubbing shoulders with the rich and the famous, or, you know, spending my retirement years in Las Vegas. Really romanticized ideals of like gambling culture. Never mind the grief or the poverty that it causes. I just had this whole idea that I was going to win big. I was going to be this like brassy gambling type person. So we go into this casino and straight away we have to sign up for memberships. And I'm like, all right, let's do it. I'm rubbing my hands together. I should mention, by the way, it's about 2 o'clock in the afternoon in the Midlands of England. Bear that information in mind. Me and Alex are signing up. We're putting in like bank card details and like all our sort of contact details, our addresses, things like that. We're really serious about like having a membership to Gala Casino. We fill in all the forms, we head up the stairs, and there's these double doors. Before I push those doors open, I've got this whole image in my head. I'm going to walk through these doors and there's going to be a crowd around like a roulette table, and they're going to be like cheering or despairing or like looking very tense. Over in the corner there's going to be like a blackjack table with like 5 people sat around it, and they're all looking really tense, and the croupier's just like looking very smart and serene, and he's just kind of handing out the cards. And then over in a dark far corner there's going to be just a single table with 3 guys sat around it with a glass of bourbon on one side and a pile of chips on the other, and they're going to be completely surrounded by darkness with one just overhead light just hanging down over the table. You can tell I've watched a few too many movies. So then we get through and we push the doors open, and me and Alex were both kind of like, what, is this it? I think there may have been one old lady. There was a roulette table, but it wasn't open. There was a blackjack table, but it wasn't open. I'm forgetting, of course. Now it's about 2:30 in Northampton, in the middle of England. You couldn't be further from the ideals that I had in my mind. So there's like one old lady, and there's just a room full of slot machines.
I'm mostly gonna be doing a slot.
These are nothing like the fruit machines you get in like your local kebab place or your pub. This is like a whole, like, you know, professional looking thing. It's got 5 reels. It's got lines crisscrossing and going all over the shop just from left to right. We never worked it out. All I can say is, in a space of about 40 minutes, 45 minutes, me and Alex had burned through about 80 quid each. To be fair, at this age, we both had jobs. We were working a lot of the time, and we didn't have to pay rent on the places we lived. I lived with my parents, he lived with his grandparents, and we had it pretty much sorted for us. After blowing that 80 or so pounds, we decided, let's just head home and plan what we're going to do tomorrow. Now, it was a fair bit of a walk to get into Northampton from where they lived. However, it turns out that where Alex's grandparents lived was pretty much across the road from a, like a driving range. You know, where like people just hit golf balls as far as they can. And we realized that if we cut across this like big green area, we could be home in like half an hour quicker than if we had walked the other way. So we go into this thing, we hop over this short wall, through some trees, and there's the green. And the balls are kind of flying sort of not at us, but we are down near the bottom of it. And we realized that we need to get to the top. So we just kind of like mosey on around the outside of where the balls are landing and just hope for the best, that one of them's not gonna like fly off to the side. And we're sort of like staying in the like plants in the trees and the bushes as much as we can. But eventually we do get spotted, and we have members of staff shouting at us, "Get off the green, what the hell are you doing?" We quickly just duck into the trees, run up the rest of the hill and try and not get spotted for the rest of the way. And somehow we make it to like where all the people are sort of teeing off their golf balls. And we get told off and get some very dirty looks, but we make our way through past them and into the office. And I remember that the people in the office were actually a little bit confused because they hadn't seen us come in, but they weren't expecting there to be any trespassers, and they didn't know that there were trespassers. And me and Alex did consider, oh, we could actually have a go at this, you know. And then we decided, actually, forget it. Let's just get back to your grandparents' house, and then we'll carry on, plan out tomorrow. When we woke up the next morning, we came downstairs and Alex's grandparents had already made us like a cooked breakfast. It was pretty sweet, right? I can't fault these guys in any way whatsoever. They were absolutely lovely and Alex got on really well with them. But me and Alex decided that it's a bit too quiet around here. We need to go find something else to do. And this is when Alex mentioned that he had a friend in Peterborough. I actually don't know to this day what this friend was called. We hung out for like 16 hours or so, me and him. I don't know what he was called, what his name is. If you end up seeing this video and you either know who I'm talking about or you are that person, please let me know in the comments. We drove over to Peterborough and he gets on the phone to this friend of his. And he calls him up and says, look, should we hang out together? And I think he may have had work or something because he couldn't meet us until much later that evening. Now, Peterborough isn't exactly far from Northampton, but it isn't exactly close either. And I didn't fancy turning around, driving back to Northampton, only to drive back in the evening. I said, why don't we find somewhere and stay the night and we can hang out overnight with this guy? Now, a little bit of information about my past. As you know from the first video, I grew up in Howsham, but I ended up moving up to Heathfield at some point. The reason for that is because somebody came after my dad in a really violent way, put him in hospital and everything, and it wasn't a guarantee that he wasn't going to come for the rest of the family. So pretty much in the space of like 1 or 2 days, the decision is made, we are fleeing Howsham. The council then offer us a solution as a temporary fix. We can put you up in the local Travelodge just outside of Howsham until basically we can find somewhere else for you to go. We were effectively homeless. And when we went to that Travelodge, there were 7 of us. Now the council were willing to pay for 1 family room for the duration that we were going to be staying at this Travelodge. However, 7 people was, I think, at least 1 too many. A lot of my sisters were quite a bit younger, going down to like being babies. I myself was about 14. So what we then did for the next couple of weeks while we were living in this Travelodge was my parents would basically have to sneak me in. It could be that we checked into our room a lot earlier in the day, or just sort of like some people just didn't leave and then other people could come visit and then end up staying for a bit longer. But at one point it was decided that if I got found out about, or if a member of staff did come and complain, I would have to go and sleep in the car at least until about 12:30, 1 in the morning. And then because this Travelodge was all on ground floor. Oh, by the way, Travelodge, for those who don't know what a Travelodge is, basically when it's not in a city or town centre, you can think of it as a motel in like the American sense. It's like a little roadside hotel chain. So basically I could remember which window my family was staying in and gently knock on the window, and my dad would open the window and help me get into the room. Basically I took this information and was like, right, we're going to check into this Travelodge that's outside of town. Me thinking it was going to be cheap. It wasn't cheap. It was like 70-80 quid when we rocked up there. I was expecting to pay no more than 40, but no, it cost me about 70 or 80 pounds, and this was not going to be money well spent, as it turns out. So me and Alex check into this room, and then before this guy arrives, we quickly nip to a supermarket and we just stock up on like snacks and a lot of alcohol, particularly beer, and this 1 bottle of something called Taboo. I'll tell you right now, me and Alex could drink anything. We literally did drink anything sometimes. Neat vodka, not a problem. He would drink tequila, I would drink absinthe. Nothing bothered us in terms of its alcohol content or its flavour as long as it was alcoholic. Not one of us, not me, nor Alex, nor Alex's friend, could even stomach like a small glass of this taboo stuff. I ended up taking that stuff back home with me and offering it to my dad, and he couldn't drink it. Anyway, when we get into this hotel room and then this guy shows up, me and Alex had like these whole big plans. Once again, it's funny how we could always make these really big plans, like with the casino and expecting this all vision. Have you ever seen the music video for Low by the Foo Fighters? Basically, we were going to be like that. You know, we were going to go in there like the cheap rock stars that we obviously thought we were, and we were going to trash a hotel room, and we were going to get wasted, and you know, we were going to forget about the whole thing. We're going to pay a late fee when we got out next morning, blah, blah, blah. You know, we were going to be really raucous and annoying. But what's really funny is that while me and Alex decided we were going to raise hell and leave a mess, it just wasn't in our nature to do that on purpose. Don't get me wrong, we did it loads of times by accident. We could be completely unaware of like other people and just do really annoying things to people. But the idea of intentionally making a mess just didn't sit right with us. And we were thinking about the house staff the next day, and we're like, oh no, you know, we'll make a mess, but we won't make that much of a mess. You know, the staff, they get in, they have to get out very quickly. You know, they got to turn over the rooms. No. So we were like literally trying to leave the room as we found it while trying to get drunk. Honestly, by about 12:30, 1 in the morning, we had long stopped drinking and we just sat around watching TV at this point. And we called it a night early on, and it was a complete washout, but still just very indicative of how me and Alex saw ourselves versus how we actually were. The next morning we get up early, we check out early. Turns out this guy's got work, so he just leaves. And me and Alex, we drive back to Northampton. We arrive and once again are greeted with, you know, a lovely cup of coffee and a lovely chat with his grandparents. And then me and Alex decide on the next thing we're going to do. Despite how it comes across, me and Alex weren't these raucous, partying people. We tried to be, but eventually our true nature would always kind of get a bit disgusted and feel a bit icky and heavy with this kind of mentality. And you can see this in part 2 of the Isles of Scilly videos as well. We went on like a pub crawl through like 5 days or 6 days of island hopping, and then eventually decided we just needed to go for a hike. We just needed to go for a swim in Alex's case. We just needed to go out and spend some time in nature. And this was something that was very key to both me and Alex. Actually, a lot of my friendship group were very heavily embedded in nature when we just needed that time to detox. And me, Alex, Nick, Simon is still like this, actually. We would spend days just hiking through like fields and hills and forests and looking for like different kinds of plants and animals and birds and insects. And so this is what we decided we needed to do. Me and Alex, I'm not sure whose idea it was, but we headed to an Argos and we bought the cheapest 2-man tent we could find. I think it may have been about £25. And we just got in my van, loaded up some stuff for Alex and myself, like snacks and whatnot, and we just headed out of Northampton into the surrounding countryside. I didn't even look on a map. Every time we got to a junction, I would just kind of look and judge which way looked the most natural and off the beaten track. If it had streetlights, I went the other way. If it had buildings, I went the other way. Essentially, I was looking for those kind of country roads that you only get in like the middle of nowhere, where there is width for one car, and if you come across a tractor, you've just got to reverse back for bloody ages. That's what I was looking for. And then when we hit one of those roads, me and Alex kept an eye out of both windows for anywhere that said campsite. And eventually we found this cute, picturesque little cottage that was like something out of a jigsaw puzzle. And we went down the driveway and there are geese coming up to the side of my car. There are like sheep and pigs in little pens around, and it is the most beautiful little cottage with flowers around it and everything, and a lovely field. And it's completely empty, but it had a campsite sign like somewhere before we entered. So then we get out the car, we walk over to this cottage, we knock on the door, and a bunch of dogs run round the corner to greet us. And eventually the door opens and we're greeted by a husband and wife who look to be in their 50s or so. These people could not have been lovelier. They charged us like £4.50, and me and Alex go and set up our tent, and it turns out that Alex didn't know much about it, but by the time we got to the Isles of Scilly, we were both pros at doing this. And we set up our tent, and we're in there just chilling, and we're listening to the sounds of like the farmyard animals and birds, and not a car to be heard in any distance. It is absolutely bliss. This is exactly what we need. We can smell the green, like living life in the air. It's lovely. And then eventually, like the woman that lived in this house, she comes out to see us, and she calls to us from outside the tent. I poke my head out, and she said, "Would you like some dinner?" And we go in, and we get literally like a roast dinner made for us, and it is so lovely. They were just like, we have children around about your age, a bit older, and we actually have grandchildren now, and we used to have there being more people around here. We just like to welcome people basically, and you know, make sure that they're having a good time. So yeah, we went in and had a meal, and we sat down and chatted with them for a bit, and we could tell we were from like very different walks of life from each other and didn't have that much to talk about. I have some farming experience in my background, but these people had spent their entire lives on farms and various campsites and doing whatever they could to try and generate an income. And me and Alex, we went into our tent full, feeling very happy, very serene, and we just decided, this is lovely, we need to do this again. And it's actually from that trip that we decided to do the Isles of Scilly trip. We took that tent, and it was only a couple of weeks later that I booked the ferry tickets to go to the Isles of Scilly. The next morning we got up early, we packed up our stuff, we went and said our thank yous and goodbyes to the couple who ran the place, and we were back at Alex's grandparents' house by about 9 o'clock. After this, Alex decided, actually, I do want to come back to East Sussex with you. After having breakfast at Alex's grandparents' house, me and Alex hit the road and we went down the M1 towards London and towards the southeast. Now, there's going to be a lot of context to explain in this, but effectively, to get to where we lived in the kind of eastern half of East Sussex, it looks like on a map that typically you will go around the east of London, but then what happens is that if you go there during the day, it's usually backlogged with a crap load of traffic at the Dartford crossing, which you also have to pay a toll to go across. So what I would always do, and what most people do, is you go around the west, slightly longer but a lot quicker and ultimately cheaper than the other more direct route. What a lot of people then do if they're going to East Sussex is they will get off at junction 7 and go down the M23 and then sort of split off and head towards either Lewes or Brighton, or maybe go through the A272 towards like Uckfield and that sort of way. But I grew up right next to the A22, and I always kind of felt this very strong affinity to the A22. It was a stone throw from where I grew up in Howsham, and I always preferred to go down this route if the traffic was looking good. This day the traffic was looking good, so I got off at junction 6 and went down the A22. This would prove to be very enlightening, shall we say. So the warning I gave at the beginning of this video happens around this part of the video. Alex never really paid attention to the road. He certainly wasn't driving any of the time that I knew him. And as a perpetual passenger, he did what a lot of passengers do on long drives, and he would entertain himself by looking at something generally inside the car, maybe a phone or something. And By the time we got off the M25, his feet were on the dashboard and he was basically lying back in his seat. I didn't mind this. As long as he didn't do anything that was going to get us pulled over by the police, he could do whatever. But the point is that he couldn't even see the road or like probably many of the signs, or he certainly wasn't looking at them. So I'm driving down the A22 and I can basically be assured that Alex wasn't looking at anything outside the vehicle. He may have been sort of looking up at the sky at some points, but generally speaking, he wasn't paying attention to the road in any kind of way. And I know this because we went through Surrey, we crossed the border into East Sussex, and the first town that you come across when you cross the border into East Sussex is a small town called Forest Row. I've driven through it many times, and I know that you are through this town in less than 5 minutes. It is not particularly noteworthy, apart from the fact that it looks quite pretty and it has a bunch of private schools in it. I go past the sign that says welcome to Forest Row, and I can assume that Alex wasn't paying attention to the road in this case, because it's a good minute or so after I pass the sign that says welcome to Forest Row. I can only assume that Alex is looking up at the trees, at the shapes that the trees were making above the car. There is really not much else to look at on this particular stretch of road that I'm driving on, when he suddenly sits up, very suddenly, and says, "Is this Forest Row?" And I say, yeah, actually it is. Why, do you know this place? And he says, yeah, I went to boarding school around here. And I didn't know how to respond to this, so I was just like, oh, okay then. And then he went kind of quiet and said, something happened at that school. There's so many question marks and additional information that I need to put in around this story. For example, I've researched the thing that he then tells me, and I haven't been able to find anything about this. Not from a time period that he possibly ever would have been at this place. That being said, the way he reacts, the way he told this story, something about it felt so real. Now, I feel like I really need to explain something here. Not as an excuse for how I took this story and reacted to it, but to explain it a bit. Basically, it was the mid-2000s. You had Ricky Gervais, South Park, and Jimmy Carr at the height of their powers. And edgy, dark humor was really like a communication style for a lot of young people at that time. Particularly me, Nick, and Alex would often have competitions to see who could say the most messed up thing. And so when Alex said what he said next, I didn't believe that it was real and came back with what I thought was a joke of my own. Basically, what Alex said was that he was going to the head teacher's office. I don't know if he had been sent there or if he decided he had a question that he wanted to ask. That's not the detail from this story that I remember. But effectively, he went to the head teacher's office and he opened the door without knocking. And what he was greeted with was the head teacher having sex with a young boy who was Alex's best friend at that school. And the way Alex told this story was very serious in its tone. But like I say, we had this whole thing of like trying to outdo each other in saying the most messed up things. So I assumed that he was telling some sort of joke. And whether or not he had been telling some sort of joke, what I came back with was absolutely disgusting. Because I responded, did he at least look like he was enjoying it? Which is absolutely disgusting, but didn't really hit me and how horrible it was until I looked over at Alex and he had tears streaming down his face and he looked to me and responded to my response, "It's not a fucking joke." I apologized profusely. I immediately recognized that what I said was way over the line and apologized so much. But then after that, we just didn't speak for the rest of the journey. I don't remember if the plan was for him to come back to my house or if he wanted to go back to his mum's house. But I remember he then asked at some point to be dropped off at his mum's house, and we didn't speak for a few days. After that, I never brought up this incident ever again, and neither did he. In fact, this aspect of Alex is something that I have never told anyone. I don't think I've ever told my mum, and I haven't told my wife, and I tell those guys everything. As far as I know, before I mention this in this video, I may be the last person alive who knew this about Alex. And if that's the case, it explains so much of his mental health struggles, his traumas, his drug and alcohol dependence that he would go on to have, and his rebellion against anything that looked like private schooling, his rebellion against this kind of upper class lifestyle that his mum wanted him to have. Suddenly, through this lens, makes a lot of sense. I mean, it may have just been a case anyway. And I should really stress this right now. Alex was the kind of person who could get the wrong end of the stick. Alex was the kind of person who could sometimes make stuff up, or like he may have got very like mixed messages or confused about something. I don't know. There's still a question mark about this whole incident. I have tried to research Forest Row schools at that time and, you know, various allegations and stuff. And while I've come across stuff, I've never come across anything that would have been from anywhere near the time that Alex would have been at school there, which would have been like late 90s or early 2000s. But the way he reacted to what I said, the way he told this story was so raw. Now, I'm inclined to believe it. And yeah, it's the most dark aspect of Alex that I know. I'm sorry that I've kind of had to end the video on such a negative story. I'm telling this story of me going to Northampton and hanging out with Alex that was filled with a lot of good, happy memories. I'm telling it in a chronological sense that makes sense to me. And that was how the weekend ended. So on that note, I won't end the video how I usually do, but if you want to comment on anything that happened in this video, anything that came up, whether it's this really big shocking thing or indeed just any of the happier memories that we had in Northampton, then please do let me know your thoughts in the comments. And until next time, have a good one.